Hello, I'm Cyril Vanier. It's good to have you with us. This is the News Hour, live from Doha. Coming up in the program this hour, American universities rocked by protests against Israel's war on Gaza. They've also triggered demonstrations beyond the United States, spanning France, the UK, and Australia.
I'm Kristen Salumi at Columbia University, where student demonstrators have refused the administration's latest offer to try to get them to leave the campus.
An aid worker with the Belgian Development Agency has been killed by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. And a sanitation and water crisis on the streets of Gaza. We will be reporting on how diseases are spreading amid fears of cholera. Also, Ukraine issues restrictions on passports for military-age men outside the country to address a shortage of troops at home.
And in sport, the tennis world number 3, Carlos Alcaraz, has made a winning start to his clay court season. The Spaniard, who's been suffering with injury, put on a dominant performance in his quest for a record third consecutive Madrid Open title.
So we begin this hour with the voices of students from across the world. University protests that were triggered by the war on Gaza, now growing into a chorus of disenchantment with governments and leadership across the globe. It's been a little over a week since students at Columbia University in New York began demanding that their school divest from Israel. Students at Columbia, Harvard, Georgetown, MIT, and George Washington University then followed suit. And protests spread from the Northeast to campuses in Michigan, Texas, and California. And now they've gone global at University College London, in Paris at Sciences Po University, and all the way to the University of Sydney in Australia. Well, we're going to try and bring you voices from those campuses in the U.S. We are live in New York, in Los Angeles, in Washington, and in Texas. Let's start with Al Jazeera's Kristen Salumi at Columbia University, the epicenter of this campus protest movement. Kristen, you have been speaking with representatives of the student body. They are negotiating with the university leadership about their encampment, about their demands. What's happening?
That's right. It is day 10 of this demonstration. It's a beautiful Friday afternoon here in New York, and you can see I'm right alongside of the encampment where all of the tents are set up. The negotiations are ongoing, but so is the sense of camaraderie and spirit in the camp over here, where they are vowing to stay until their demands are met. The students are praying on campus now. There's a Muslim evening prayer happening right now as I'm talking to you. And in a couple hours' time, there will be a Shabbat Jewish dinner this evening as well. The students say there is growing camaraderie amongst the group, and it's very welcoming and not hostile, not anti-Semitic. They're trying very hard to fight these accusations. And they say for anyone who makes that accusation, they should come and see what's happening here. But getting to those all-important negotiations, the students told me that they spent 11 hours with the administration yesterday, another hour here this morning. There's some possibility that those discussions will continue over the weekend. There is no looming deadline at this point. They have not been given a deadline to leave or face eviction. However, they haven't been promised that that won't happen either. So there is a little bit of uncertainty, a little unsettled feeling among the protesters here. They don't know what's going to happen on that front. The university did make some concessions, or some offers, I should say, to the students, saying that they would agree to look at divestments that are being made by the university and start the process of reviewing them and talking about them with the students. But the students said that's not good enough. They want a commitment to divest from Israel, not just a promise to look at it before they leave the encampment.
Kristen, thank you so much. I'm going to go now to Heidi Jo Castro. Heidi's at the University of Texas in Austin. Heidi, I believe you have a guest with you this hour. Just before we go to that interview, though, you've been explaining that the president of the university where you are has really flip-flopped on how to deal with these protests. Why?
That's right. Jay Hartzell, the president of the University of Texas at Austin, he was taking a lot of blame after the images we saw from the first day of these protests, in which police had some violent confrontations with these student demonstrators, ultimately arresting 57 people. Almost all of them have had their charges dropped. And after the outcry that came not only from protesters, but even from some supporters of the university, well, Hartzell released a new message last night to the UT community saying that it was a difficult and tense day, saying that he believed at the time that this protest would follow what he said was the national playbook. Unclear exactly what that meant, but apparently acknowledging that there was no violence, but that the police believe there would be. And then we saw those conflicts taking place. And now he says he is, quote, grateful that these peaceful protests at the UT Austin campus are continuing. Of course, I want to know what the people here are thinking about that, and that does bring in our guest. This is Dr. Vasudevan. So much thanks to you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
As a faculty member, why is it important you to come here, and what do you make of the president's statements?
You know, it's interesting because I think the president is making it sound now as if it is the campus's free speech policies that are allowing these protests to continue, when in reality, these protests have been nothing but peaceful. They have been nothing but a spontaneous and organized expression of conversation, of people's feelings about what's happening at a time when the university is fully repressing any conversation about Palestine. Faculty are scared to mention the word Palestine in their classes. People don't want to talk about the genocide. And there has been strong indication from the university throughout since October 7th that this is not a topic of conversation, despite the formal notices and emails, occasionally in response to events that seem to claim that the university supports free speech. So I'm not at all surprised by Hartzell's comments, but I would say on one level, they're a bold-faced lie, and on another level, it's kind of cowardly, honestly, because there was no indication, there was no need to call police that day at all, and there was nothing leading up to it that would suggest that. What you're seeing happening today, as you can tell, it's a community space, it's collaborative, people have been praying, eating, learning about the law, learning about what it means to be students and exercising free speech. There have been art spaces. I did a class this morning, the same as I would in one of my seminars, and it's a beautiful space, and this is exactly the program actually from 2 days ago. Yeah. So I was asked to teach 2 days ago, and this is what it was supposed to be like.
And very quickly, we've heard from protesters saying that they still want the central message of this protest to be about the people of Gaza and the resistance to Israel's war there. Talk about how that message is, you're trying to ring that through.
Absolutely. I'm part of the Austin, Texas Faculty and Staff for Justice in Palestine. We are an ad hoc coalition of faculty who support the Palestine Solidarity Committee, the students who are the leaders and visionaries in the school who are really shifting the conversation and holding the school down, creating the space where it's possible to even have these conversations. And, I think for us as faculty, we have a commitment, we have an obligation, and as people, as humans who are living through a genocide, this is no war, this is a genocide. It is very clear, and it is clear from scholars of genocide, it is clear from human rights law, that across every measure of what constitutes a genocide, an ecocide, and a scholasticide, a killing of all universities, of faculty, of knowledge production. That is what is happening, and it is our obligation as scholars. This is what we do. I do this day in and day out, and it's my job to teach about this.
Thank you, Dr. Vasudevan.
Thank you so much.
And those are the words that are being shared here, are really conversations. In fact, there are some Israeli supporters who have also come to dialogue with these pro-Palestinian supporters here on the University of Texas Austin campus. We're seeing a peaceful protest going forth, and they say this is really in defiance of the crackdowns and the unwarranted claims of anti-Semitism that the university leadership has tried to stick to these protesters. Cyril.
All right, Heidi, thank you very much. We're going to take it back to the East Coast. Alan Fisher is at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Alan, I wonder what you're seeing, how George Washington University is dealing with the student protests there, and also whether they're engaging with the substance of the protest on any level, which is Israel's war on Gaza.
Well, what has happened here is that the protesters who were in the college yard, many of them are still there, but the numbers are down significantly, but there's still a tented encampment there. But there's a large protest in the street just outside the college yard, as you can see here. There was, about a couple of hours ago, maybe about 100 people here. That number has now swollen over the last couple of hours to close on 300, and they're having people speak and give their own views of what is happening in Gaza. Joining me live here now is Hanzade Barmadi, who is an activist, who's someone who's been involved in protests outside Antony Blinken's house, the Secretary of State here. Why are you here? What brought you to this? Because you've protested outside the Israeli embassy, outside Tony Blinken's house. Why is this so special to you?
I think the power of encampments and the power of consistent endurance and protest is extremely important. We are at a very critical moment in shifting the public opinion in the United States, holding accountable institutions that enable and support and whitewash Israel's crimes and crimes against humanity, and also showing the world that we are no longer afraid. We are no longer afraid to step into our advocacy, into the power of the resistance, and saying enough of the inhumanity, enough of the violations of international law. We've had encampments now in front of Blinken's home. Today is day 93 of our encampment in front of the home of the U.S. Secretary of State, and we are at day 60 of our 24/7 encampment also in front of the Israeli embassy. And we are so proud to have been joined by so many students, many of whom are currently camping in this yard right here, that have been with us from the beginning. And we are here to show solidarity. We are here to support the students' movements. It is extremely powerful when students start to step up and say, we are no longer afraid to risk our careers. We are not afraid to speak the truth. And we are going to put into applications everything that we're learning about in textbooks that the schools somehow are so afraid of them to do. And that's why people go to school. They go to school to learn critical thinking, to learn how to hopefully make the world a better place. And the fact that it's being stopped is ludicrous. And
a lot of the criticism has been that you're cranks, you're representing a minority view, that you're troublemakers, that you're anti-Semitic. Not that we've seen much evidence of any of that here. But do you genuinely feel a shift in American public opinion driven by the young people?
I definitely feel a shift. We've been on the streets now, as a collective group for today is 87 days. And when we started, we were getting a lot more vile commentary, a lot of just disgusting rhetoric, being called terrorists, racist, rapists. I have been called so many things, been spit on, been slapped. And what we're seeing now is more and more people saying, I wish I knew more. Your presence, your persistence, people being on the streets is encouraging us to learn. We want to know why you are so enraged and why you feel so passionately to put your lives on pause to do this full time. And that's making people curious. It makes people want to go and learn more about what's happening. The calls of, people being anti-Semitic, I have not been in a single protest where people have been saying things that are anti-Semitic. I think the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, the dehumanization of activism, the dehumanization of people calling for justice and freedom for all needs to end and needs to stop. And we are hoping that we will continue to put pressure to end that by showing who we are, by showing the true faces of peace and love and justice and the fight for freedom.
You've been a human rights activist for a long time. Do you see any parallels here with 68, with the protests that helped drive the end of the Vietnam War, or even the 1980s, where there were protests against apartheid in South Africa?
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing now is the endurance of the movement. We are seeing, they waited for us to tire out. We are currently in the epicenter of what is enabling and supporting Israel's crimes. The United States of America, specifically Washington, D.C., and so many people that occupy the buildings all around us are benefiting and have been benefiting financially, economically, socially, politically from their support and endorsement of Israel's crimes and atrocities over the last 76 years. And I think what we're seeing now is that people are saying we're no longer willing to accept it. We're no longer willing for that to be the status quo and the norm. And we're seeing a huge shift in public opinion of people actually saying that I'm not afraid to be called an anti-Semite because I know I am not one. I know I am not one. And that shift is happening. And it's very important, specifically in places like Washington, D.C., where, the city polls people that are interested in policy. The city polls people that are interested in human rights, that are interested in philanthropy and the various institutions that unfortunately we are seeing are way too dominated by Zionist ideologies that do not humanize Palestinians and our fight for freedom and justice. Our fight is not one that should be controversial. And we see in Vietnam, and we see, from all these other protest movements, it's when the masses start to stop allowing the dehumanization of our causes, when we start to own our power and step into it, when we start to say that we are willing to sacrifice our security, our freedom, our, comfort to say enough. This needs to end, enough. That's when the tide starts to change, because then you start to have endurance. I know for a fact they were waiting for us to tire out. I know for a fact, we've heard that repeatedly from Secret Service during our protests. Oh, I'm sure you guys will be gone next week. Oh, I'm sure 3 weeks. We sat through the snow, through the rain, through the hail, through the wind, through the flooding, through it all, and we're not going anywhere.
I know you're incredibly busy. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us live.